and nothing gets by these trained eyes unless it is right. That's why this correction lathe stands by, ready to rectify any possible irregularity the inspectors find in the shell. Yes, this firepower has to be right. It has to be accurate because it's made to save the lives of American boys, the husbands, the brothers, the sweethearts, and sons. Absenteeism? Take a day off now and then? Ask this lady here on the shell line. She has 4 sons, 4 personal reasons for making firepower. She and her 3 daughters are all in war plants, all fighting the battle of production. There they go, boys. There's your firepower. And each one right up to specifications. Each one way ahead of schedule. Production. Production and more production by the managers and planners, by the department heads, the engineers, the expediters, by the men and women of Weirton's mills. But wait a minute. Weirton has always been a steel plant. Where did these special machines come from, and what about the thousands of skilled shell makers? Where did they come from? The company didn't bring in any outside labor. We know that. Well, as for the machines, when the manufacturer, the tool maker, necessary manpower to make all the lathes and shell turning and knurling machines that were needed, the men of Weirton went directly into the tool makers' shops and actually helped with the construction of the specialized cutting machines and tools they needed to turn out firepower. Then they brought him back and taught the new people how to run them. And the new people, where did they come from? They were from the shops. Some were blacksmiths, some were heat treaters, riggers, carpenters, painters, repairmen, machinists. They came from the offices as well as in the mills. They came from almost every department in the plant, and they came from the homes of other employees. They were trained. They learned to be shell makers as fast as was humanly possible. Every 8-inch shell that's made is given a lot number and then an identification mark that means made by the men and women of Weirton Steel. The next step is to send each shell through the degreasing machine, where hot vapors clean the shell completely, removing all traces of oil and grease, both inside and out. Then, for added safety when the shell is fired, an extra plate of tough, thin steel is welded on the bottom. Now, more cleaning, again with a powerful blast of steel grit. And naturally, still more inspection. Then a protective coat of rust-proofing oil and a bath to cool them off and prepare them for the next machining step. The temperature of the shell must be exactly right for this all-important operation. This is known as machining the bourrelet, the only part of the shell, aside from the brass rotating band, which actually touches the gun barrel. Precision cutting is needed here to protect the gun barrel and also to ensure absolute accuracy as the shell streaks for its target. The brass band, the part that gives the shell its rotating motion, comes out of the furnace at a red heat. Then it's placed over the nose of the shell and forced into the band groove with a 2,000-pound hydraulic segment press. And the waves in the band groove hold it tight. Next, the shell is cooled again, then tightly clamped into a machine that holds it steady while the all-important fuse thread is cut inside the nose. Now the brass band is turned down to its final special contour and exact dimensions. You can note the skill, you can measure the accuracy, but you can only feel the spirit that's part of each operation on every single shell. The people of Weirton Steel showed the entire world an example of that spirit during the winter of 1944. Remember these headlines? Fighting against guns of Siegfried Line, deep into Siegfried defenses, then the furious Nazi counterdrive, American casualties huge, Nazis wedged deeper into Belgium. We were running out of ammunition, and General Eisenhower was calling for more firepower with all speed. But Weirton was making shells, making them way ahead of schedule, making more than they said they would, for the workers here had imposed no artificial limits, no quotas on the number of shells they would make in a day or a month. They just made them as fast as they could. They had a war to help win. Their one task was to keep production records going up and up. And they did it. First, 12,500 shells, then up to 53,000, then 64,000, and finally better than 70,000 shells per month. And not only the regular employees came through in this military emergency, but members of their families and their friends too rolled up their sleeves and came into the plants to help make shells. In fact, citizens from all over the tri-state area came to help wherever they could. They learned how to make shells fine and fast, and they caught the feel of that something we've called the spirit of Weirton Steel. They worked nights, they worked days, they worked Sundays and holidays too. They were producing firepower for General Eisenhower and his men. They made the shells, and they also made, repaired, and sharpened the cutting tools with which to make still more shells. With the whirl of the grinding wheel for a carol and the flying sparks for tinsel, they celebrated Christmas Eve and Christmas Day as well. There was no time out for holiday celebrations like Christmas or New Year's. All through the plants, they kept the day in their hearts and thought of the old-fashioned Christmases yet to come. But they stayed on the job. There was important work to be done, firepower to make, and firepower saves American lives. So the shells were made ready. A protective collar placed around the brass band. And they were given the final inspection, loaded into cars for fast freight trains, and delivered to Uncle Sam, where they were loaded with TNT and painted a bright yellow that meant high explosive. Again, just to be doubly sure, shells from each batch were sent to the Ordnance Proving Ground. The nose ring replaced by the timing fuse, and the shell given a test, a very practical test. And the shells were okay. They were made that way. So they were sent to the boys at the fighting front with all possible speed, on fast freight trains, destroyers, and even by air. And the rest, we already know. Victory. Victory with the help of firepower. And that's the story of the men and women of Weirton Steel. A story typical of all American industry and the people who helped win the battle of production.